The morning sun painted the Hindu Kush mountains in shades of gold and amber when Sarah Chun first heard the voice that would change everything. She crouched behind a cluster of jagged rocks at 8,000 feet elevation, her breath forming small clouds in the thin air. Through her high-powered scope, she watched 12 Navy SEALs making their way up the treacherous mountain path below, completely unaware they were walking into a carefully orchestrated ambush. Sarah had been tracking this Taliban cell for 6 weeks. She knew their patterns, their weapons, their exact positions in the cave network ahead. What the SEALs didn't know was that Ahmad Massoud, one of the most wanted terrorist commanders in the region, had been expecting them. Intelligence had been leaked. The mission was compromised before it began. She pressed her finger against her earpiece and listened to the SEAL team's radio chatter. Their call signs were professional, their movements precise, but they were heading directly into a kill zone that would claim all 12 lives within the next 30 minutes. Sarah Chun had 2 choices: maintain her cover and watch elite American warriors die, or blow her own mission to save them. The decision took her less than 3 seconds to make. Sarah keyed her radio to the SEAL's frequency, something that should have been impossible given their encrypted communications. But Sarah Chun wasn't just anyone. She was a former CIA operative who had spent the last 18 months operating completely off the books in these mountains, hunting the men who had killed her entire team in a green-on-blue attack that officially never happened. SEAL Team 7, this is Falcon. You have hostiles in Overwatch positions at your 12 and 3 o'clock. Recommend immediate cover. The voice that came back through the radio was sharp with surprise and authority. Unknown station. Identify yourself immediately. This is a secure frequency. Sarah could see the team leader through her scope. Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison, according to her intelligence files. 12 years active duty, 3 tours in Afghanistan, Silver Star recipient. Good man, good leader, about to be dead if he didn't listen. No time for protocol, Commander. You have snipers tracking your point man right now. Take cover behind the boulder field to your 9 o'clock. Do it now. Morrison hesitated for exactly 2 seconds. In those 2 seconds, Sarah watched a muzzle flash appear from a cave opening 400 meters ahead of the SEAL team. She had already calculated the trajectory, wind speed, and target adjustment. Her Barrett .50 caliber rifle was already trained on the target. The terrorist sniper never got a shot off. Sarah's bullet found him first, the sound echoing across the valley like thunder. The SEAL team hit the ground instantly, training taking over as they scrambled for cover. Falcon, what the hell was that? Morrison's voice crackled through the radio. That was me saving your point man's life. You have 11 more hostiles in fixed positions. I can guide you through, or you can call for extraction. Your choice, Commander. Sarah watched through her scope as Morrison gathered his team behind the rock formation she had designated. She could see him weighing options, calculating risks. He was probably wondering who she was, how she had accessed her frequency, and whether this was some kind of elaborate trap. Falcon, I need verification of your identity. Commander, in about 30 seconds, 3 more snipers are going to open fire on your position from the caves at your 2 o'clock. After that, mortars will start falling on the boulder field. I suggest you decide quickly whether you trust me or not. 28 seconds later, exactly as Sarah had predicted, gunfire erupted from the cave positions. The SEALs pressed themselves against the rocks as bullets sparked off stone around them. Morrison keyed his radio immediately. Falcon, we're listening. What do you need us to do? Sarah was already repositioning, moving along the ridge line with a fluid grace that had earned her the call sign. She moved like her namesake, silent and deadly from above. Her ghillie suit blended perfectly with the rocky terrain, making her invisible to anyone more than 50 meters away. There's a goat trail 30 meters to your north. It leads to an outcropping that will give you cover from the cave positions. I'll provide overwatch and take out their heavy weapons. Falcon, who are you? What unit? Sarah paused in her movement. The question hung in the thin mountain air between them. How could she explain that she wasn't with any unit anymore? That she had been declared killed in action 18 months ago? That officially, Sarah Chun no longer existed? I'm someone who wants Ahmad Massoud dead as much as you do, Commander. That's all you need to know right now. She watched Morrison signal his team. The SEALs moved with practiced efficiency, using hand signals and coordinated movement to advance toward the trail she had indicated. Sarah counted 12 enemies in the cave network, but there were likely more deeper inside the mountain. Massoud was definitely here. She had been tracking him for 2 months. As the SEAL team began their movement, Sarah lined up her second shot. A terrorist had appeared at one of the lower cave mouths, carrying what looked like an RPG. She adjusted for wind and distance, then squeezed the trigger. The man dropped instantly, the RPG clattering uselessly on the rocks. "Nice shot, Falcon." The voice belonged to the SEAL team's sniper, Petty Officer Marcus Cole, according to her intel. That was an 800-meter shot uphill. Impressive. Sarah didn't respond. She was already moving again, repositioning for the next phase. The SEALs were approaching the outcropping, but she could see movement in the upper caves. Massoud's men were repositioning too, bringing heavier weapons to bear. Her radio crackled with Morrison's voice. "Falcon, we're in position. What's our next move?" Sarah studied the cave network through her scope. She had spent weeks mapping these tunnels, learning their layout, identifying weak points. There was a way to get the SEALs inside without them walking into the main defensive positions, but it would require precise timing and absolute trust. "Commander, there's a secondary entrance on the north face of the mountain. It connects to the main tunnel system about 200 meters inside. The path is exposed, but I can provide covering fire." "How do you know about secondary entrances?" Sarah's jaw tightened. Because she had spent the last 18 months living in these mountains like a ghost. Because she had explored every cave, mapped every tunnel, studied every position while hunting the man who had destroyed her life. "I've been here before, Commander. Trust me or don't, but decide fast. They're bringing up mortars." As if to emphasize her point, the first mortar round exploded against the mountainside 50 meters from the SEAL position. Rock fragments scattered like deadly rain, and the sound echoed across the valley. Morrison didn't hesitate this time. "Lead the way, Falcon. We're following your guidance." Sarah felt something stir in her chest, an emotion she hadn't experienced in 18 months. These men were trusting her completely, putting their lives in her hands based on nothing more than her voice and 2 successful shots. It reminded her of what it felt like to be part of a team again. She pushed the feeling aside and focused on the mission. "The trail starts 20 meters east of your position. Single file, 5-meter intervals. Watch for loose rock on the 3rd switchback. I'll call out threats as I see them." As the SEALs began their ascent toward the secondary entrance, Sarah established a new firing position that gave her overlapping fields of fire across the approach route and the main cave entrances. Through her scope, she could see terrorists moving inside the tunnels, preparing for a siege that they thought would end with 12 dead Americans. They had no idea that Falcon was hunting from above and that she had been waiting 18 months for this moment. The first SEAL reached the secondary entrance without incident. Sarah had eliminated 2 threats during their ascent, taking long-range shots that the terrorists couldn't locate or return fire against. She was a phantom in the rocks, delivering death from impossible distances. "Falcon, we're at the entrance. Looks clear inside." Sarah studied the tunnel mouth through her scope. It was clear, but not for long. Her intelligence indicated that Massoud kept guards at regular intervals throughout the tunnel system, and once the SEALs entered, she would lose visual contact with them. "Commander, once you go inside, I'll have limited ability to assist. The tunnels branch in 3 directions about 50 meters in. Take the left branch. It leads to the command center where Massoud is operating." "How can you be sure?" Sarah's finger tightened on her rifle stock. Because she had been inside those caves. Because she had spent months learning every detail about Massoud's operation while planning her revenge. "I'm sure, Commander. But be advised, there are at least 15 hostiles between you and the target. I'll try to create a distraction from out here." "What kind of distraction?" Sarah was already moving to a new position, one that would give her access to the main cave entrances. Her plan was risky, but it would draw attention away from the SEALs' infiltration route. The kind that will make them forget all about watching the back door. She reached her new position and began setting up for rapid fire on multiple targets. Through her scope, she could see terrorists moving equipment and taking defensive positions at the main cave mouths. They were expecting a frontal assault from the SEALs, not realizing that Morrison's team was already inside the mountain. Sarah took a deep breath and began her distraction. The first shot took out a heavy machine gun position at the primary cave entrance. The second eliminated a sniper who had been tracking movement on the valley floor. The third shattered a radio antenna, cutting off communications between the cave positions and any external support. Immediately, the mountainside erupted with return fire directed at her last known position. But Sarah was already gone, moving to her next firing point with the speed and stealth that had kept her alive for 18 months of solo operations. Her radio crackled with Morrison's voice. Falcon, we're inside and moving toward the target. Your distraction is working. They're pulling guards from the interior positions. Sarah continued her deadly game of cat and mouse with the terrorists outside the caves, drawing their attention while the SEALs moved deeper into the mountain. Each shot was calculated not just for maximum effect, but for maximum psychological impact. She wanted them confused, scattered, afraid of an enemy they couldn't see or locate. What she didn't know was that Ahmad Massoud had recognized the shooting pattern. He had seen this ghost before, 18 months ago, when his green-on-blue attack had supposedly eliminated an entire CIA team. But someone had survived that attack, someone who had been hunting him ever since. Someone who called herself Falcon. Deep inside the mountain, Massoud was preparing for a reunion he had thought would never come. The woman who had haunted his nightmares was finally within reach, and this time he would finish what he started in that blood-soaked compound 18 months ago. The SEALs were walking into more than they realized, and Sarah Chun was about to face the ghosts of her past in the darkness beneath the mountain. The tunnel system beneath the mountain was like a maze carved from living rock, and Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison felt the weight of every decision as he led his 11-man team deeper into the darkness. Their night vision equipment painted everything in green and black, making the ancient passages look like something from another world. Behind them, the sound of Falcon's ongoing firefight echoed through the mountain like distant thunder. Whoever she was putting on a hell of a show. Morrison had counted at least 15 separate engagements in the past 20 minutes, and the return fire suggested she was keeping a significant force occupied outside. Command, this is SEAL 7. We are approximately 100 meters into the target structure. Falcon is providing excellent overwatch. Moving toward objective. The response crackled through his earpiece with static interference from the mountain rock. SEAL 7, Command. Be advised, we have no record of any Falcon call sign in your operational area. Recommend extreme caution with unknown friendly. Morrison paused his advance and keyed his radio for a private response. Command, Falcon has saved our asses twice already and is currently keeping half the enemy force busy while we approach target. Unless you have better intelligence on who she is, we're proceeding with her support. Roger, SEAL 7. Your call on site, but get positive identification when possible. Morrison almost smiled despite the situation. Get positive identification from a sniper who is operating completely off the books in one of the most dangerous regions of Afghanistan, right? That would be his first priority after they secured Ahmad Massoud. The tunnel branched ahead, exactly as Falcon had predicted. Morrison signaled for his team to take the left passage. As they moved deeper, he found himself wondering about the woman who had appeared out of nowhere to guide them. Her shooting was professional grade, her tactical knowledge was perfect, and her intel on the tunnel system was better than anything in their mission briefing. Sir, the voice belonged to Petty Officer Cole, their sniper. Movement ahead. Looks like 2 guards at a checkpoint. Morrison moved forward to assess the situation. Through his night vision, he could see 2 men sitting behind a makeshift barrier of sandbags and ammunition crates. They looked relaxed, unprepared for an assault from this direction. Falcon had been right about the secondary entrance being unguarded. Morrison signaled for silent takedown. Cole and Petty Officer Rodriguez moved forward like shadows, their knives finding targets before the guards could raise an alarm. The team advanced over the bodies and continued deeper into the mountain. 300 meters above them, Sarah Chun was fighting her own battle against an enemy that seemed to multiply with every shot she fired. Her distraction had worked too well. Every terrorist in the cave complex was now focused on hunting her, and she was running low on both ammunition and hiding places. She had moved through 4 different sniper positions in the past 20 minutes, staying ahead of return fire and counter-sniper attempts. But the mountain was only so big, and they were starting to coordinate their search pattern. Soon, they would have her surrounded. Sarah's radio crackled with Morrison's voice. "Falcon, we're approaching what looks like a main chamber. Multiple hostiles visible. Can you confirm Massoud's location?" Sarah paused her movement and consulted the hand-drawn maps she had created during months of surveillance. If the SEALs were where she thought they were, the main chamber would be the command center. Massoud would be there, along with his inner circle. "Confirmed, Commander. That's the target location. But be advised, Massoud has at least 8 men with him, and the chamber has multiple exit routes. If he slips away, you won't get another chance." "Copy that. Any suggestions?" Sarah was already moving toward a position that would give her a view of the mountain's rear exit routes. If Massoud tried to run, she would be waiting. "Give me 5 minutes to get into overwatch position for his escape routes. Then go in hard and fast. Don't give them time to think." As she moved across the rocky slope, Sarah's mind drifted back to the last time she had been this close to Ahmad Massoud. 18 months ago, in a CIA safe house that had been anything but safe. She had been part of a 6-person intelligence team working with Afghan National Army forces to disrupt Taliban supply lines. The mission had been going perfectly until one of their Afghan allies opened fire during a planning meeting. Sarah had been in the communications room when the shooting started. By the time she reached the main room, 5 of her teammates were dead or dying. Massoud had been there, supervising the execution of American intelligence operatives. Unofficially, Sarah Chun had crawled out of that compound and spent the next 18 months planning her revenge. She shook off the memories and focused on the present. The SEALs were counting on her, and she wouldn't let another team down. "Falcon in position for rear exit coverage. You're clear to engage." Morrison's response was immediate. "SEAL 7 moving to contact." The assault in the command chamber began with flashbang grenades and automatic weapons fire. Even through the mountain rock, Sarah could hear the fierce gun battle echoing through the tunnel system. The SEALs were good at their job, and they had the advantage of surprise. But Ahmad Massoud was a survivor. Sarah watched through her scope as figures emerged from a concealed exit on the mountain's north face. 4 men, moving fast toward a vehicle hidden among the rocks. She recognized Massoud immediately, even at 600 meters distance. Sarah lined up her shot and took a deep breath. This was the moment she had been waiting for since that bloody day 18 months ago. The crosshairs settled on Massoud's center mass, and her finger began to apply pressure to the trigger. The shot that came from behind her was unexpected and nearly fatal. The bullet passed close enough to her head that she felt the shock wave, and rock fragments from the impact point stung her face. Sarah rolled away from her position as more shots followed, seeking cover behind a boulder formation. Someone had flanked her position while she was focused on Massoud. Through her scope, she could see the terrorist commander reaching his vehicle and escaping down the mountain road. Her target was getting away because she had been outmaneuvered. Sarah keyed her radio while returning fire at her attackers. "Commander, Massoud is escaping via vehicle on the north face. 4 men, moving toward the valley road." Morrison's voice came back strained with combat stress. "Falcon, we're pinned down in here. Multiple hostiles in defensive positions. Can you assist?" Sarah was trapped in her own firefight with 3 terrorists who had worked their way around behind her position. She couldn't help the SEALs, and she couldn't pursue Massoud. Everything was falling apart. That's when she made a decision that would change everything. Sarah pulled a fragmentation grenade from her vest and threw it toward her attacker's position. The explosion bought her 30 seconds of chaos, which she used to sprint toward the main cave entrance. If she couldn't help the SEALs from outside, she would help them from inside. The cave entrance was unguarded now, with all available men either fighting her outside or defending against the SEAL assault deeper in the tunnels. Sarah moved through the passages with the confidence of someone who had mapped every turn and measured every distance. She reached the command chamber just as the gun battle was reaching its climax. Through a side passage, she could see Morrison's team pinned behind makeshift cover while terrorists fired from elevated positions around the chamber. The SEALs were outnumbered and outgunned, but they were holding their ground. Sarah attached a suppressor to her sidearm and began working her way around the chamber's perimeter. One by one, she eliminated the terrorists in the elevated positions, shooting them from behind while they focused on the SEALs below. Her movements were silent, deadly, efficient. Morrison noticed the change in enemy fire patterns immediately. What the hell? They're dropping like flies up there. Sarah keyed her radio. Falcon is inside. Continue your assault on the main positions. The voice that came back was filled with surprise and something that might have been admiration. Falcon, you beautiful crazy person. How'd you get in here? I know these tunnels better than they do, Commander. Let's finish this. The battle lasted another 10 minutes, but the outcome was no longer in doubt. Between the SEALs' frontal assault and Sarah's flanking maneuvers, the remaining terrorists were eliminated one by one. When the gunfire finally stopped, 8 enemy fighters lay dead in the command chamber. But Ahmad Massoud was gone, escaped in the chaos while Sarah fought to save the SEAL team. Morrison's voice echoed in the sudden silence. Area secure. All tangos down. Sarah emerged from the shadows where she had been providing overwatch. In the green glow of the SEAL's night vision equipment, she looked like a ghost materializing from the mountain itself. Her ghillie suit was torn and dirty, her face was streaked with mud and blood from rock fragments, but her eyes were alert and focused. For the first time, the SEALs could see the woman who had been guiding them through the mission. She was smaller than they had expected, Asian American, probably in her 30s. But there was something in her posture and movement that spoke of extensive combat experience and absolute confidence in her abilities. Morrison stepped forward and extended his hand. Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison, SEAL Team 7. I'd say it's a pleasure to meet you, but under the circumstances. Sarah shook his hand briefly. Sarah Chun, sorry about your target getting away. I had him in my sights when his people flanked my position. Sarah Chun. Morrison repeated the name slowly. That name sounds familiar. Weren't you killed in action 18 months ago? Yes. Officially, I don't exist anymore. The silence that followed was filled with understanding. Morrison had heard rumors about intelligence operatives who fell off the official records, who continued operations without support or backup. Ghost agents hunting personal vendettas in the shadows of America's longest war. So what now? Morrison asked. Sarah looked around the command chamber, taking in the tactical maps and communication equipment that Massoud had left behind. There was intelligence here, information that could lead to other targets, other operations. Now you complete your mission and get your team home safely. I continue hunting the man who killed my team. Alone. Sarah's smile was cold and dangerous. I've been alone for 18 months, Commander. I'm used to it. Morrison studied her face and made a decision that would change both their lives. Maybe you don't have to be alone anymore. Before Sarah could respond, her radio crackled with an intercept from Taliban communications. Ahmad Massoud was already planning his next operation, and it was bigger than anything he had attempted before. The intelligence suggested a coordinated attack on multiple American positions, using weapons and tactics that could kill hundreds of soldiers. Sarah looked at Morrison and his team, these elite warriors who had trusted her completely based on nothing more than her voice over the radio. For the first time in 18 months, she felt like she might be part of something larger than her personal quest for revenge. Commander, if you're serious about working together, I have information about Massoud's next target, but it's going to require resources I don't have access to. Morrison keyed his radio to contact his headquarters. Then, let's see what kind of resources SEAL Team 7 can provide. As the echoes of their conversation faded into the mountain darkness, neither Sarah nor Morrison realized that Ahmad Massoud was listening to their communications from his escape vehicle. The terrorist commander now knew exactly who Falcon was, and he was already planning how to use that knowledge against her. The hunt that had begun 18 months ago in a blood-soaked CIA safe house was about to become something much more personal and much more dangerous than either side had imagined. The Joint Operations Base at Bagram Airfield buzzed with unusual activity as Sarah Chun walked through the secured briefing area for the first time in 18 months. Officially, she was still dead, but Lieutenant Commander Morrison had called in favors with people who had the authority to temporarily resurrect a ghost. Sarah felt strange wearing clean clothes and walking among uniformed personnel after so long operating alone in the mountains. The stares followed her as she moved, word having spread quickly about the mysterious sniper who had saved SEAL Team 7 and fought alongside them in the Hindu Kush. Chun. The voice belonged to Colonel Marcus Webb, a man Sarah recognized from intelligence briefings before her supposed death. He looked older than she remembered, with new lines around his eyes that spoke of too many difficult decisions. "You look remarkably good for someone who's been dead for 18 months. Sarah stopped in front of his desk and stood at attention despite wearing civilian clothes. Old habits died hard, even for dead operatives. "Sir, I understand you want to debrief me about recent operations." Webb studied her with the careful attention of someone who had spent decades evaluating intelligence assets. What he saw was a woman who had been forged by isolation and hardship into something harder and more dangerous than she had been before. The Sarah Chun interpersonnel file had been a good intelligence officer. The woman standing before him was a weapon. "Sit down, Chun. We need to talk about Ahmad Massoud and what you've learned about his operations." Sarah took the offered chair and opened the field notebook she had carried for 18 months. Every page was filled with observations, sketches, tactical assessments, and intelligence gathered during her solo mission. It was the most complete picture of Massoud's organization that anyone had compiled. "Massoud isn't just running a local Taliban cell," Sarah began. "He's coordinating with multiple groups across 3 provinces, and he's receiving support from external sources that go beyond traditional Taliban funding." Webb leaned forward with interest. "What kind of support?" Sarah flipped through several pages of her notebook, stopping at detailed drawings of weapons and equipment she had observed. "Advanced communication gear, night vision equipment that's better than some of our own, and medical supplies that suggest someone is planning for sustained operations." "Any idea who's providing this support?" "I've tracked supply convoys back to the Pakistani border, but they're using routes that bypass normal smuggling channels. Someone with significant resources is backing Massoud's expansion." Webb absorbed this information while studying the maps and diagrams in Sarah's notebook. Her 18 months of solo surveillance had produced intelligence that would normally require a full team and months of coordinated effort. "Chun, I'm going to be direct with you. Officially, you're still dead, and there are people who would prefer to keep it that way. Your team's elimination was embarrassing for several agencies, and admitting that someone survived means admitting that our intelligence was flawed." Sarah had expected this conversation. She had known that returning to the official world would be complicated by politics and bureaucracy. "What are my options, sir?" "Option 1, you disappear again, and we forget this conversation ever happened. Option 2, you work with Morrison's team on a completely black operation to eliminate Massoud's network. No official support, no backup if things go wrong, and no guarantee that we'll acknowledge your existence when it's over." Sarah didn't hesitate. "Option 2. Webb smiled for the first time since their conversation began. "I thought you'd say that. Morrison is briefing his team now about the intelligence you provided. Apparently, Massoud is planning something big, and it's happening soon." 30 minutes later, Sarah found herself in a secure briefing room with SEAL Team 7, looking at satellite photos and intelligence reports spread across a large table. Morrison had changed into clean fatigues, but his team still showed signs of their recent mountain operation. "Falcon," Petty Officer Cole nodded as she entered. The rest of the team looked up with expressions of curiosity and respect. Word of her solo infiltration of the cave system had spread quickly among the SEALs. Morrison gestured to a chair at the head of the table. "Sarah, we've been going through the intelligence you provided. If you're right about Massoud's timeline, we have less than 72 hours before he launches coordinated attacks on 3 different coalition bases." Sarah studied the satellite photos, identifying locations she had observed during her months of surveillance. The primary target is Forward Operating Base Chapman. It's isolated, undermanned, and the approaches are perfect for the kind of coordinated assault Massoud specializes in. "How many defenders?" asked Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez, the team's explosive ordnance specialist. Approximately 40 Marines and 20 Afghan National Army soldiers. Good fighters, but not enough to handle what Massoud is planning. Morrison traced supply routes on a tactical map. According to your intel, he's assembled over 200 fighters for this operation. That's a significant escalation from his norm. A successful large-scale assault on an American base would be a propaganda victory that could shift the entire dynamic of the regional conflict. So, what do we do about it? The question came from Petty Officer Jackson, the team's communications specialist. Sarah looked around the table at faces that had learned to trust her completely in the span of a single mission. These men were elite warriors, but they were also strangers to the kind of unconventional warfare she had been practicing for 18 months. We don't try to stop 200 fighters in a direct confrontation. We eliminate their leadership, disrupt their communications, and force them to attack without coordination or clear objectives. Morrison leaned back in his chair. You're talking about assassinating Massoud before he can launch the operation. I'm talking about cutting off the head of the snake. Without Massoud's leadership and planning, his fighters are just scattered groups with no unified strategy. Chief Rodriguez studied the mountain terrain on the satellite photos. Where's Massoud now? Sarah pulled out her notebook and sketched a compound layout from memory. He's moved to a fortified position in the Safeco Mountains. It's an old Mujahideen stronghold from the Soviet War with natural defenses and prepared fighting positions. He chose it specifically because it's considered impregnable. But you've been there, Morrison stated rather than asked. Sarah's smile was cold. I've been everywhere Massoud has been for the past 6 months. I know that compound better than his own security team. The planning session that followed lasted 8 hours. Sarah's detailed knowledge of terrain, enemy dispositions, and tactical patterns filled in gaps that satellite intelligence couldn't provide. By the time they finished, SEAL Team 7 had a complete assault plan for a target that had been considered impossible to approach. But as they prepared to leave the briefing room, Morrison pulled Sarah aside for a private conversation. Chun, I need to ask you something, and I need a straight answer. Is this about stopping Massoud's attack, or is this about personal revenge for what happened to your team? Sarah met his gaze directly. Both. Does that matter to you? Morrison considered the question carefully. He had seen enough combat to understand the difference between professional motivation and personal vendettas. Both could be dangerous in different ways. As long as your personal mission doesn't compromise ours, I don't have a problem with it. But if you're so focused on killing Massoud that you can't see the bigger picture, people are going to die. Commander, I've spent 18 months thinking about nothing but killing Ahmad Massoud. But today, when I had to choose between taking my shot and saving your team, I chose your team. That should tell you something about my priorities. Morrison nodded slowly. It tells me you're still a professional. That's what I needed to know. As they prepared to leave Bagram for the mission, Sarah felt a strange mixture of anticipation and anxiety. For 18 months, she had operated completely alone, making all decisions and accepting all risks. Now she was part of a team again, with people who were depending on her and people she was depending on in return. The feeling was both comforting and terrifying. That night, as SEAL Team 7 prepared their equipment and reviewed the mission plan, Sarah sat alone in temporary quarters writing letters she hoped would never be delivered. Letters to the families of her dead teammates, explaining what had really happened 18 months ago and why their loved ones had died. She sealed the letters in an envelope addressed to Colonel Webb with instructions to deliver them only if she didn't return from the mission. Some ghosts, she reflected, needed to be laid to rest regardless of what happened to her. At 0200 hours, the team boarded a stealth helicopter for insertion into the mountains. As they lifted off from Bagram, Sarah looked down at the lights of the airfield and wondered if she would ever see civilization again. The mission they were attempting had never been tried before. A direct assault on a fortified mountain stronghold by a single SEAL team, guided by a dead intelligence operative who had been hunting the target for 18 months. The odds were not in their favor. But as the helicopter disappeared into the darkness above the Afghan mountains, Ahmad Massoud was making his own final preparations. He had spent the day reviewing intelligence reports from sources within the coalition, and he now knew exactly who Falcon was and why she had been hunting him. He also knew that she was coming for him tonight, and he had prepared a reception that would end her quest for revenge permanently. The compound in the Safe Combe Mountains wasn't just fortified against attack. It was specifically designed to trap and eliminate the woman who had haunted his nightmares for 18 months. Sarah-chan thought she was hunting Ahmad Massoud, but the terrorist commander had turned the tables. Tonight, the hunter was about to become the prey, and SEAL Team 7 was flying directly into the most sophisticated ambush that Massoud had ever constructed. In the darkness below the helicopter, 200 fighters were taking their positions for an attack that would begin at dawn. But 50 of those fighters were positioned in the mountains around Massoud's stronghold, waiting for a ghost named Falcon to finally walk into a trap that had been 18 months in the making. The war between Sarah-chan and Ahmad Massoud was about to reach its final chapter, and the outcome would determine the fate of more than just their personal vendetta. The helicopter insertion went perfectly until it didn't. Sarah-chan felt the change in the aircraft's vibration pattern 30 seconds before the pilot's voice crackled through her headset with controlled urgency. "We've got multiple heat signatures converging on the landing zone. This smells like an ambush." Through the helicopter's window, Sarah could see muzzle flashes erupting from positions that should have been empty mountain terrain. Someone had known they were coming, and they had prepared accordingly. Lieutenant Commander Morrison's voice cut through the tactical radio chatter. "Falcon, how good is your intelligence on this area?" Sarah studied the terrain below through night vision goggles, comparing what she saw with her mental map of the region. The enemy positions were in locations she had never observed during her surveillance, suggesting they had been established specifically for tonight's operation. "Someone leaked our mission, Commander. They're not defending the compound. They're hunting us." The pilot banked sharply to avoid a rocket-propelled grenade that streaked past the aircraft's rotor assembly. "I need a new landing zone, and I need it fast. We're taking too much fire to maintain this approach." Sarah quickly calculated alternatives. The original insertion point would have put them within 2 kilometers of Massoud's stronghold with covered approaches and multiple escape routes. Every other option involved longer distances, exposed terrain, or both. There's a plateau 8 kilometers north that should be clear of enemy positions. It adds 4 hours to our approach time, but it's our best option. Negative, Morrison responded immediately. "We lose the time advantage. Massoud launches his attack at dawn, and Chapman gets overrun. We need to get closer." Sarah looked at the tactical situation developing below them. The enemy had positioned at least 30 fighters in overlapping fields of fire around their primary landing zone. Any attempt to insert there would result in the helicopter being shot down and the entire team being killed before they reached the ground. But there was another option, one that would require Morrison to trust her completely. "Commander, there's a landing zone 700 meters from the compound that they probably haven't covered because it's technically impossible to use." "Défi technically impossible." Sarah pointed to a narrow ledge visible on the infrared display. It's a rock shelf about 15 meters wide with a 1,000-foot drop on 3 sides. The helicopter can hover, but it can't land. We'd have to fast rope onto the ledge in complete darkness. The silence on the tactical frequency lasted exactly 5 seconds before Morrison responded. "Pilot, can you hold steady enough for a fast rope insertion onto that ledge? In these winds, it'll be like threading a needle while someone shoots at you." "But yeah, I can do it." Sarah felt a familiar surge of adrenaline as the helicopter changed course toward the impossible landing zone. This was the kind of operation that separated elite units from everyone else, executing complex maneuvers under enemy fire while maintaining absolute precision. As they approached the ledge, Sarah could see Massoud's compound clearly through her night vision equipment. The stronghold was built into the mountain face like an ancient fortress, with multiple levels connected by narrow pathways carved into the rock. Defensive positions were visible at every level, and she could see guards moving between firing points. The helicopter reached the insertion point and began its delicate hover above the narrow ledge. The rotor wash created a small hurricane of dust and debris, but the pilot held position with remarkable steadiness. Morrison looked at his team and then at Sarah. "Falcon goes first. If the ledge won't support our weight, or if it's a trap, she can assess the situation before we commit the entire team." Sarah appreciated the tactical logic, but she also understood the subtext. Morrison was putting her at maximum risk because she was the most expendable member of the team. She was officially dead, operating without support, and her loss wouldn't create the same political complications as losing Navy SEALs. Understood, Commander. Sarah clipped onto the fast rope and dropped into the darkness below the helicopter. The descent took exactly 12 seconds, and she landed on solid rock with enough space for the entire team. The ledge was larger than it had appeared from above, with natural cover positions that would provide concealment from the compound's observation posts. Ledge is secure. Proceeding with insertion. One by one, the SEALs descended onto the narrow platform. The helicopter departed immediately, its sound fading into the distance as the team established defensive positions on the rock shelf. For the first time in hours, they were in a tactical environment that Sarah understood completely. Distance to target is 700 meters horizontal, 300 meters vertical descent, she whispered into her radio. The compound has 3 levels with interconnected tunnels and prepared fighting positions. Estimated 40 to 50 defenders. Morrison studied the fortress through his night vision scope. What's our best approach route? Sarah pointed to a series of natural terraces that descended toward the compound's lower level. There's a goat path that leads to the water supply system. If we can reach that point without being detected, we can access the tunnels from below their main defensive line. And if we're detected, then we fight our way through 50 men in prepared positions with no backup and no escape route. Chief Rodriguez looked up from checking his demolition charges. Just another day at the office. The team began their descent from the ledge using climbing equipment and tactical movement techniques. Sarah led the way, drawing on 18 months of solo operations in similar terrain. Each step had to be silent, each movement calculated to avoid detection by the sentries she could see patrolling the compound's perimeter. Halfway to their objective, Sarah raised her hand for the team to freeze in place. Through her night vision scope, she had spotted something that made her blood run cold. The distinctive profile of Ahmad Massoud himself, standing on the compound's highest balcony and looking directly toward their position. Contact. Massoud is in visual range, but he's not reacting to our presence. Either he hasn't seen us, or he's letting us approach. Morrison moved up beside her to assess the situation. Could be arrogance. He thinks his position is impregnable. Sarah studied Massoud's body language through her scope. He was relaxed, confident, and occasionally speaking to someone out of her view. Everything about his posture suggested a man who was in complete control of the situation. No, he's not surprised by our presence. He's expecting us. The realization hit both Sarah and Morrison simultaneously. This wasn't just an ambush of their insertion. It was a carefully orchestrated trap designed to draw them into the compound, where they could be captured or eliminated under controlled circumstances. So what do we do? Morrison asked. Sarah considered their options. They could abort the mission and try to escape, but that would mean Massoud's attack on Chapman would proceed as planned. They could continue with the assault despite knowing it was a trap, but that would likely result in the entire team being killed or captured. Or they could change the rules of engagement completely. We give him what he wants, but not the way he expects it. Sarah began moving toward the compound again, but instead of following the concealed approach route she had originally planned, she started moving along a path that would bring them into the open where the sentries would definitely spot them. Falcon, what are you doing? Morrison's voice carried a note of alarm. Massoud wants to capture me alive. He's been hunting me for 18 months, and now he has a chance to end our personal war on his terms. He'll let us get close because he thinks he can control the situation. And if you're wrong? Sarah checked her weapons and equipment one final time. Then you complete the mission and get out. Don't let my mistake doom the operation. As they approached the compound's outer defensive line, Sarah felt the strange calm that had sustained her through 18 months of solo operations. She had always known that her hunt for Massoud would probably end with her death. The only question was whether she could accomplish her mission before that happened. The first sentry spotted them when they were still 200 meters from the compound entrance. Instead of raising an alarm, he spoke quietly into a radio and continued watching their approach. Sarah counted at least 6 other guards who had clear shots, but we're holding their fire. They're letting us walk into the trap, Morrison observed. Then, let's make sure we're the ones who spring it first. Sarah led the team to the compound's main entrance, where two guards stood beside an ancient wooden gate reinforced with steel plates. The guards made no move to stop them, instead opening the gate and gesturing for them to enter. Beyond the gate lay a courtyard surrounded by multi-level structures carved directly into the mountain face. Sarah could see fighting positions at every level, with guards visible but not actively threatening. It was like walking into a medieval fortress where the defenders were confident enough in their advantages to allow visitors. Ahmad Massoud appeared on a balcony overlooking the courtyard, accompanied by 4 armed men. He looked exactly as Sarah remembered from 18 months ago, tall, bearded, with intelligent eyes that missed nothing. When he spoke, his English was accented but clear. "Welcome to my home, Falcon. I have been looking forward to this meeting for a very long time." Sarah looked up at the man who had killed her team and shattered her life. For 18 months, she had dreamed of this moment. Now that it had arrived, she felt nothing but cold professional focus. "Ahmad Massoud, you've been harder to find than I expected." Massoud smiled. "I was not hiding from you. I was preparing for you. There is a difference." Morrison stepped slightly forward, his weapon ready, but not directly threatening. "We're here to prevent your attack on Chapman. Surrender now, and your men will be treated according to the Geneva Convention." Massoud's laugh echoed across the courtyard. "Commander, you are not here to prevent anything. You are here because I allowed you to come. My attack on Chapman will proceed as planned, but first, I will finish what I started 18 months ago." Sarah felt the trap closing around them as guards began moving into positions that would cut off all escape routes. Massoud had orchestrated this entire scenario to draw her into a controlled environment where he could eliminate her and her new allies simultaneously. But Sarah Chun had spent 18 months learning to think like Ahmad Massoud, to anticipate his tactics and strategies. She had one advantage that he didn't know about. She had been planning for this exact scenario since the day she started hunting him. And her plan was about to unfold in ways that would surprise everyone, including the SEALs who thought they understood what kind of mission they were on. The courtyard fell silent as two opponents who had been hunting each other for 18 months finally faced each other directly. What happened next would determine not only their personal fate, but the fate of hundreds of coalition soldiers who were counting on them to prevent Massoud's dawn attack. In the darkness surrounding the compound, the rest of Massoud's forces were beginning their movement toward Chapman. Time was running out, and the real battle was about to begin. The explosion that rocked the compound's foundation came exactly 47 seconds after Ahmad Massoud finished speaking. Sarah had been counting down in her head since they entered the courtyard, waiting for the charges she had planted during her months of surveillance to detonate according to their predetermined timer. The blast originated from the compound's ammunition storage area, which Sarah had infiltrated 3 weeks earlier during one of her reconnaissance missions. The explosion created a chain reaction that brought down half of the mountain stronghold's defensive positions and sent debris raining into the courtyard. In the chaos that followed, Sarah moved with the precision of someone who had rehearsed this exact scenario dozens of times in her mind. While guards scrambled to respond to the unexpected attack, she eliminated 2 sentries with her suppressed sidearm and created a path for the SEAL team to reach cover. "Move to the eastern wall," she shouted over the sound of continuing explosions. "There's a tunnel entrance that leads to Massoud's command center." Morrison and his team responded instantly, following Sarah's lead while engaging targets that appeared in their path. The SEALs had trained for dynamic environments, but Sarah's intimate knowledge of the compound's layout gave them advantages that no amount of preparation could provide. Ahmad Massoud recovered from the initial shock faster than his men. As debris settled around the courtyard, his voice cut through the chaos with commands in Pashto that sent his remaining fighters into coordinated defensive positions. He had built this stronghold to withstand conventional assault, and he still held most of the tactical advantages. But he had underestimated the woman who had spent 18 months studying every aspect of his operation. "Falcon!" Massoud's voice echoed from the balcony where he stood surveying the destruction. "Very clever, but You have only delayed the inevitable. My men are already moving against Chapman, and you are still trapped here. Sarah reached the tunnel entrance she had identified and turned to face the terrorist commander. For the first time since entering the compound, she allowed herself to smile. Your men aren't moving against Chapman, Ahmad. They're dead. The confusion on Massoud's face was visible even at distance. Impossible. I spoke with my field commanders 20 minutes ago. Sarah pulled a radio detonator from her vest and held it where Massoud could see it. You spoke with your field commanders before my secondary charges destroyed their staging areas. I've been tracking your forces for weeks, mapping their positions, placing explosives in their supply depots and assembly points. The truth hit Massoud like a physical blow. While he had been orchestrating an elaborate trap for Sarah, she had been systematically destroying his ability to launch the attack on Chapman. The hunter had indeed become the prey, but not in the way he had anticipated. Impossible, Massoud repeated, but his voice carried less certainty. Sarah keyed her radio to a frequency she knew Massoud's remaining forces would be monitoring. Chapman Base, this is Falcon. Enemy staging areas have been neutralized. Threat level reduced to local forces only. The response came immediately from the coalition base that had been expecting a massive assault at dawn. Falcon, Chapman Base. Confirmed. We're tracking multiple secondary explosions across the valley. Whatever you did out there, it worked. Morrison looked at Sarah with something approaching awe. You planned this entire operation while we were still at Bagram, didn't you? I've been planning this for 18 months, Commander. Tonight was just the culmination. But the mission wasn't over. Massoud still controlled the compound, and he still had enough fighters to make their escape extremely difficult. More importantly, as long as he remained alive, he would eventually rebuild his network and threaten coalition forces again. Massoud seemed to reach the same conclusion. His voice carried across the courtyard with renewed authority. Kill them all. Leave none alive. The final battle for the mountain stronghold began with coordinated fire from multiple levels of the compound. Sarah and the SEALs found themselves pinned behind rubble while bullets sparked off stone around their position. Despite the damage from her explosions, Massoud's men still held superior numbers and defensive positions. We need to reach that command center, Morrison said while reloading his weapon. As long as Massoud can coordinate his people, we're going to get worn down eventually. Sarah studied the compound layout, calculating distances and cover positions. The tunnel entrance was 30 meters away across open ground that was covered by at least 4 different firing positions. A direct assault would be suicide, but there was another way, one that would require absolute trust between her and the SEAL team. I need you to provide covering fire for exactly 60 seconds, Sarah told Morrison. Don't ask questions, don't try to follow me. Just keep their heads down until I signal all clear. Where are you going? Sarah checked her climbing equipment and looked up at the compound's highest level where Massoud was directing his fighters. I'm going to end this the way it started 18 months ago, up close and personal. Before Morrison could object, Sarah sprinted from their cover position toward what appeared to be a solid wall. At the last second, she grabbed a climbing rope she had concealed during one of her earlier reconnaissance missions and began ascending toward the upper levels of the compound. The route she had chosen was invisible from most of the defensive positions, allowing her to climb while the SEALs provided suppressing fire below. In less than 90 seconds, she had reached a balcony just below Massoud's position. Sarah could hear the terrorist commander barking orders to his men, coordinating fields of fire and calling for ammunition resupply. His voice carried the confidence of someone who believed victory was still possible despite the setbacks. She pulled herself over the balcony railing and moved silently toward the doorway that led to Massoud's command post. Through the opening, she could see him standing over a tactical radio, still trying to contact the field units that no longer existed. Sarah drew her sidearm and stepped into the doorway. Ahmad. Massoud turned to face her with an expression that shifted from surprise to anger to something that might have been respect. For several seconds, they stood facing each other across 3 meters of ancient stone floor, 2 adversaries who had been hunting each other for 18 months. Sarah Chun, the ghost who refuses to stay dead. I told you 18 months ago that I would find you. I told you I would make you pay for what you did to my team. Massoud's hand moved slowly toward the pistol on his belt. And what did you accomplish? Your team is still dead. Your life has been consumed by revenge. You have become as much a killer as I am. Sarah's aim never wavered. The difference between us is that I kill people who deserve to die. And who decides what someone deserves? You? Your government? Your conscience? For 18 months, Sarah had anticipated this conversation. She had imagined different versions of this confrontation, different words that might be spoken. But now that the moment had arrived, she felt only emptiness where her anger had been. My team decided when they chose to serve their country instead of selling it out for money. Massoud's hand stopped moving toward his weapon. You think this was about money? You think I betrayed your people for profit? I think you're a terrorist who kills innocent people to advance a political agenda. I think you're responsible for hundreds of deaths, including 5 people who trusted you enough to work with you. And I think you are a woman who has spent 18 months alone in these mountains because she cannot accept that sometimes good people die for no reason at all. Sarah felt something shift inside her, a recognition that surprised her with its clarity. Ahmad Massoud was right about one thing. She had become consumed by her quest for revenge, isolated from everything that had once given her life meaning. But that didn't change what had to happen next. Maybe you're right. Maybe I've become something I didn't want to be. But you're still going to pay for what you did. Massoud smiled sadly. We all pay, Sarah Chun. The question is whether we pay for our choices or for our circumstances. The gunshot that ended their conversation came from behind Sarah, not from her weapon. She spun to see Lieutenant Commander Morrison standing in the doorway, his smoking sidearm pointed at where Massoud had been standing. The terrorist commander lay on the stone floor, killed instantly by a precision shot to the head. Morrison lowered his weapon and looked at Sarah with understanding. You hesitated. In 18 months of planning, you never considered that you might hesitate when the moment came. Sarah stared at Massoud's body, feeling a strange mix of relief and loss. Her mission was complete, but the ending felt different from what she had imagined during all those months of solitary hunting. Why did you do that? Morrison holstered his weapon. Because you saved my team, and because some burdens shouldn't be carried alone. The compound had fallen silent around them. With Massoud dead and their command structure eliminated, the remaining fighters had either fled into the mountains or surrendered to the SEALs. The battle was over, and with it, Sarah's 18-month quest for revenge. But as they prepared to leave the stronghold, Sarah realized that her real journey was just beginning. For the first time in 18 months, she wasn't alone with her ghosts and her anger. For the first time since her team died, she had people who understood what it meant to serve something larger than yourself. 6 hours later, as their extraction helicopter lifted off in the mountain valley, Sarah looked down at the ruined compound where her personal war had finally ended. Ahmad Massoud was dead, his network was destroyed, and Chapman Base was safe from the attack that would never come. Colonel Webb met them at Bagram with news that would change everything. Sarah Chun was being officially resurrected, her service record restored, and her actions during the mountain operation formally recognized. She would have a choice between returning to intelligence work or accepting a transfer to special operations. But the most important recognition came from Lieutenant Commander Morrison and SEAL Team 7, who had voted unanimously to recommend her for assignment as their permanent intelligence liaison. They had learned to trust Falcon completely, and they wanted to continue working with the woman who had saved their lives and taught them that sometimes the best operators were the ones who had been forged by loss and tempered by solitude. Sarah accepted the assignment, but not because she wanted to continue the war. She accepted because she had learned something important during her 18 months in the mountains. The best way to honor the dead wasn't to spend your life hunting their killers, but to spend your life protecting the people they had died trying to save. 3 months later, Sarah Chun was serving as intelligence officer for special operations teams across Afghanistan, using her knowledge of terrain and tactics to keep American soldiers alive. She still carried the scars of what had happened to her first team, but she no longer carried them alone. And sometimes when a mission required it, she still went by Falcon. The woman who had spent 18 months as a ghost in the mountains had found her way back to the world of the living, not through revenge, but through service to something larger than her personal pain. It wasn't the ending she had planned, but it was the one that allowed her to finally lay her ghost to rest. In the mountains of Afghanistan, where the air is thin and trust is thinner, legends are born from ordinary people who find extraordinary strength in the bonds of brotherhood forged in battle. Sarah Chun had become one of those legends, not because she had hunted down her enemies, but because she had learned that sometimes the most important mission isn't the one you plan for yourself, but the one that chooses you when you're ready to serve something greater than your own need for closure. The ghost named Falcon had found her way home.